Our session 1 is on rebuilding India's textile and apparel industry. The session will be chaired by Secretary Textile Shri Upendra Prasad ji. The session will be moderated by Chairman Technopack Advisors, Mr. Arvind Singhal. Mr. Singhal, as we all know, is a veteran in this sector, having started his operations in 1992. Technopack today is India's leading management consulting firm, focusing on various sectors, including textile and apparel. Our other eminent panelists of the session are Chairman Export Promotion Committee, Apparel Export Promotion Council, Mr. Gautam Nair. Mr. Gautam Nair is also the Managing Director of Matrix Group of Companies. Matrix and its subsidiaries are engaged in manufacturing of apparel, leather, footwear and accessories in India, Bangladesh, Vietnam and Jordan. We have with us Vice Chairman of Textile, Mr. Sunil Patwari. Mr. Patwari is the Managing Director of Nagrika Exports and a Chartered Accountant and an alumni of the Indian Institute of Management, IIM, Ahmedabad. With over 3 decades of experience, he has been also actively involved in the industry as member of Textile and served as Director of BITRA. We have with us the Vice Chairman of SRTEPC, Mr. Bhadresh Dodhiya. He is the Head International Sales and Finance at Dodhiya Group. The Dodhiya Group is one of the leading manufacturers of yarns and chemicals in India. Having established firmly in the domestic market, the group has successfully forayed into exports of specialized yarn to over 25 different countries across the world. We also have Mr. Lokesh Parashar from the Federation of Buying Agents. FBA is the Buyers Council in India and represents buyers from all over the world through India offices, buying agents, license offices, foreign brands, all in India. Now may I request our Secretary Textiles, Shri Upendra Prasad ji, to kindly chair the session and start the proceedings.
Welcome back, everyone. What I would do is that since I have already spoken, I have taken my time and the session is also running late. And it is better also to hear some of the experts, because all the people sitting in this hall, perhaps the person with the least experience in the textile sector would be me actually. I find my special secretary here, but he also have couple of years more experience in the textile industry, because he was AS and FA and then he was AS and now he is a special secretary. So what I will do is, since I have already covered most of the things, I will hand over to Mr. Arvind Singhal, who would be moderating today's session. So maybe he will make his opening remarks and then he will get the views of all the panel members, and let us not overshoot time, because we will have our next session also. There is another session before the lunch, is it? Yeah, so let's not overshoot the time. So I hand over to Arvind Singhal ji to conduct the proceedings further. As and when required, I would speak, or maybe otherwise I will speak at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. A very good morning to all of you. And thank you very much, CT, Mr. Rajgopal, for giving me this opportunity to be amongst friends after a fairly long gap, if I may say so, at least physically. So let me just start to put the context. When we used about reimagining and then we can only rebuild, in my view, with about 37 years of my fairly active presence in the textile and clothing sector, if I were to pass, sort of put India's textile industry in 4 phases, and I want to use that for context setting. Let us say before 1950s, 1947, the primary objective of the industry was focused on clothing our Indian population, which was still very significant at that time, 350 million Indians or so. And of course, in addition to that, meeting the effort of British for the World War I and World War II. Post-independence, Rightfully so, the focus was largely that how do we clothe our population. When I say clothe our population, means affordability, accessibility, functionality, many of those factors have to be there. But sometime in 1970s and 80s, we made the first foray to look into beyond cotton. So man-made fibers, some production from end products, and then later on going backward into intermediates and raw materials. That happened in the 70s and 80s. So that was the second phase, 1950s to 80s. From 1990s till now, our focus has been to add more volume. Our population has increased, the purchasing power in the country has increased. Our exports have also increased, so volume for export. And that has been the large area for the industry. But when we look into 2020 forward, if we want to reimagine, we have to think value, not volume. We have to think ecosystems rather than only fiber or which product to make. And lastly, but equally importantly, we have to also think about sustainability, which the Secretary himself pointed out, the kind of knowledge which he got by visiting AEPC in terms of the negative impact of this industry when it comes to environment. That it is a serious challenge. There are multiple industries that have to be reimagined themselves completely based on sustainability platform itself. Fast fashion, for example, is likely to come under huge amount of pressure, and so on and so forth. So this was just the context setting that for the next 10, 20, 30 years, value, not volume, ecosystem, rather than vertical or backward or forward integration, and sustainability might be the guiding lights for us there. If I can take a minute more, some change in our terminology, our means in this case I'm talking about the industry, is I would like to suggest. Firstly, we have to think beyond fiber and beyond product orientation or beyond vertical integration. It's too yesterday's thinking. Ecosystem includes putting up manufacturing locations, logistics locations, in whichever part of the world there is a market opportunity. Simple product vertical integration may not be enough. Adjacencies become a huge mind block for us. हम लोग फाइबर बना रहे कॉटन का, उसके बाद हम लोग उसको knit कर लेंगे. That is the meaning of a conventional thinking of adjacency. Please think blue ocean, to use another cliche. Think beyond value chains. Think solutions. Everybody is looking for a solution whichever way. And last part, think of technology beyond just deploying ERP. Technology has a role to play in just about every facet, starting from demand forecasting to supply chain management, and so on and so forth. With this opening comment, there are four very, very eminent people on this panel, and I took the liberty of requesting all of them to cover at least one facet of this particular subject. So let me start with Gautam, Mr. Gautam Nair. Gautam, would you want to spend a couple of minutes mentioning about the present status of India's and global textile industry, but focus more on the disruptions, what you see are happening right now, which will impact our industry and the global industry.
Thank you, Arvind. As our Secretary Textiles just pointed out, that in his opening address he had covered most of the points which he was to cover here. He's also covered most of the points which I was to cover here also. But let me just focus on some of the key points in response to what Arvind has said, that what is the current status and what are the disruptive trends which we are seeing today. Let's talk of current status. I just want to piggyback or emphasize on what Arvind has said when he talked to the different stages of growth. Let me just talk about one stage of growth which happened post the MFA abolition, which is around 2006, when quotas went finally out of the window. Those of you who were in business at that time may remember that there was intense debate within our industry that is this quota abolition going to be good for India, for India's apparel exports and for the rest of the textile industry, or will it be bad for India? And as always, there were two schools of thought. Both argued very vehemently for their respective positions. The figures in the first 2 years flattered to deceive. There was a temporary hike in garment exports, but after that we went back to the low rate of growth which Secretary Textiles talked about in his opening address. And as he correctly said, this presages the problem we've had recently of cotton prices, etc. So it is somewhat kind of chronic, somewhat kind of endemic to our industry. Just to quote you another figure which puts this in perspective, in 2007, India was exporting around 10 point something billion dollars of apparel. Bangladesh at the same time was also exporting around 10 point something billion dollars. And we would marvel at how Bangladesh had caught up from a very low base with India and almost no textile base at all. Incidentally, at that time, India's per capita income was about almost twice that of Bangladesh's. Fast forward to the present, last year, ending March 2022, Bangladesh exported around $44 billion of garments, while we are struggling at 15 point something billion dollars. And last year, to the great credit of Bangladesh, their per capita income actually exceeded India's. And it is not a coincidence. It is not, they are not two independent situations. The phenomenal economic development of Bangladesh has its roots in the way they have handled the growth of their garment industry. We will discuss, I hope, more in terms of what are the reasons for this, and most important, what we should do about this going forward. But since Arvind asked me to focus specifically on the disruptions, we are seeing two huge disruptions going forward. One is with the COVID epidemic. I think the concept of supply chains, primarily which originated in the West, has changed. The previous concept was that never mind if the supply chain is disaggregated, go to that element, go to that country which can provide, say, the best quality or the best variety or the best price, and use logistics to deliver product finally at the appropriate price you want, even if it is manufactured across 3 or 4 different countries. And today also, if you look at some of the major supply chains in the world, not just in textiles or apparel, but across electronics or engineering industries, it is still a very disaggregated supply chain. That has been brought to focus, I think, first by the tsunami in Japan, when after the tsunami, 3 weeks later, factories in Detroit started shutting down. And then more recently by the COVID lockdowns, which was unprecedented, but brought home this truth that you need to rethink disaggregated supply chains. And that is what is happening today. And hence, we talked about, I think Rakesh Mehra talked about the onshoring which is happening, or closer to the market which is happening, or countries needing to get more vertical. And therein lies one of India's biggest competitive advantages. The second disruptive factor is, no discussion on textiles and apparel, or for that matter, so many other industries would be complete without talking of the China position. And the whole geopolitical forces against China, resulting in business moving significantly away from China in the past years, is a huge disruption which has happened in our industry. Unfortunately, India has not benefited from that. The main benefit from that has been Bangladesh, Vietnam, other countries, but not yet India. And I say not yet because I truly think the opportunity is before us to seize. I may also add that the picture on this front in recent times is a little murky. When we were looking at the data in AEPC, we found that in the last year, China has suddenly reversed its position in exports of garments. And China's exports actually rose by almost 30% in the last year. So China is far from a spent force. It was declining, but now it's right back. And I personally know some US customers who had exited China, who were not finding the base in other countries, including India, and had to go back to China, and they managed to restart their operations there very quickly. And that may be one reason why China is suddenly showing a almost $30 billion increase in apparel exports last year. The third, I won't call it a disruptive force, but I would call it a possible opportunity for India, is the focus primarily in the West on circularity and sustainability. it's an extremely important thing for the world. I mean, if we want to bequeath a better world to our next generation, it's extremely, extremely important to focus on that. It's also very important, the textile and apparel industry has a bad name for being a polluter across the value chain, be it in wastages, be it in the utilization of water or whatever. And this is an area where I think this is catching up. This is becoming an increasingly big issue. It has the potential of becoming an increasingly big opportunity. And sometimes when you're late starters in something, you can piggyback on the fact that you have access to the latest technology on it. And this is what I think India can and must do, both in the textiles and apparel industry.
Thank you very much, Gautam. Very, very aptly put the 3 points: supply chain shifts, not just disruptions, the geopolitical factors which are coming into play across all industries, all countries, and of course, circular and sustainable economy could be a threat, could be an opportunity. Thank you so much. Sunil ji, challenges हमको मालूम है. Let us think opportunities कहाँ पर हैं, both international and India. और उनको fulfill करने के लिए what kind of steps we have to take to improve our competitiveness. ये 2 questions पे अगर आप थोड़ा जी.
Thank you, Arvind ji. The tone has been well set, starting with the PM yesterday in his, on the 15th in his speech about India must become a developed country. Secretary Saab ne bhi ye baat kahi. Opportunity arises out of the challenges. With these new sourcing patterns of China +1, the shift to near-shoring and shift in product range. These are the challenges, but they're also the opportunity. And India can stage a turnaround by bringing an all-round development in terms of the manufacturing infrastructure, transportation, logistics, R&D, and innovation. We need to look at our product portfolio and undertake measures to realize higher values by not only strengthening our partnership in the supply chain, but also moving towards establishing maybe 100 mid-sized brands in the next 5 years, and then subsequently upgrading at least 10-15 of those to big brands, which will give us a greater share in the product sourced by retailers across the world. We need to build new competencies in our product basket, bringing in the factor of sustainability and also offering greater awareness about the environment, like in terms of getting our factories LEED certified. As Secretary Saab earlier said that Bangladesh has more than 180 LEED certified factories, whereas we have very few. Environmental safety is a very, very challenging and demanding situation right now. We have to go green, we have to go organic, we have to become conscious about the carbon footprint. Recently, the government has also brought in and has tabled an amendment to the Energy Conservation Act, which will help us set up a carbon market within the country. Traceability, circularity are an integrated part of this recycling process. We need to strengthen our systems and methods to bring this in. It has already started, but as Arvind ji said, we need to think big and make a big leap. So, sustainability, circularity, traceability, and product innovation, focusing on value rather than volume, is what we need to do, and that's where the opportunity lies for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sunil, while you all made very, very good points, to me the most interesting point which you made in the context of adding value is to build brands. I think this is where I think Indian industry has to focus on creating global brands rather than only very successful domestic brands. We talk about Uniqlo, of course we know about Inditex, Zara, we know about H&M, and there are so many other global companies, including even companies which are riding on brands like Shein, who have built tens of billions of dollars of global market opportunity, tens of billions of dollars. Rakesh, you're looking a bit perplexed. I was just mentioning about the Chinese company, although they are in trouble because of sustainability issues, but its market cap is close to $100 billion US. Within India, I'm told they do a couple of thousand crores of turnover. It's a Chinese company there. But I think this is the direction we should be looking at to create opportunities for us which are of a different magnitude altogether. And brands can certainly do a big role to play in that. So thank you very much for bringing this point. But this is now slightly changing a bit of attack. I can say with confidence personally, and especially after 2005. Before 2005, I will reserve my comments as far as the role and the action steps the government is concerned. But I can see as an observer and as a participant, government has actually taken 2 steps when 1 step was needed. Government has actually tried to run when the industry just wants to walk. So I would dare say that the government has been extremely proactive in terms of reacting to the industry needs and many times being proactive to the needs of the industry. How can we, in the next 10 years, as we reimagine the industry, have a better alignment of industry needs and government policies? Any thoughts on this?
Yeah. Thank you, Arvindji. Thank you, dignitaries, for throwing light. Arvindji, coming back to your question, how government policy should realign to ensure the growth in textile?
Government policy and industry together.
And industry together. We all are aware that India today is predominantly cotton industry. And today, the consumption in India, cotton versus MMF, is 60-40 ratio, where 60% is cotton and 40% is MMF. However, the global trend is reverse, with 75% MMF and rest of them is going natural fiber, mainly cotton. So in my view, it's no brainer that the government policies has to align more with the MMF segment of the textiles, where there is a tremendous opportunity for India to grow. Now, the policy per se, either we do catch-up game, what others are doing, and we just go and do ourselves better and get the share of it, or along with this, we also look at the future of the textile industry and incorporate those in the policies, mainly per se in terms of circularity of textile or sustainability of textiles, where MMF will be the fiber which will drive the sustainability and circularity for future. So we are well poised in MMF today. MMF, we are numbers 2 in global player in terms of production, with the capacity of 1.4 million kgs in VSF, and in polyester about 5 million kg, and 28,000 square meter of fabrics in MMF. A recent scheme from government like PLI, PM Mitra, National Technical Textiles, they are all major, barring PM Mitra. The other 2 schemes are already focused on MMF segment. So government has been, as you rightly said, proactive and listening to industries, looking at the future trend, and they are acting quite significantly faster. So government, while all these schemes are very long-term implementation scheme, government in the meantime should also align themselves to check the fiber availability in the country and ensure the fiber-based is self-sufficient. So while this schemes matured by itself, we have timeline of 3 to 5 years from now to enhance our production in MMF fibers specifically, and make sure the raw materials are available in abundance and at international prices. So I think government should look at the productivity of MMF and derive a policy which will increase the productivity of fibers and raw materials for technical textiles or PLI schemes. There is also on cards of revival of or renewal of tough scheme. I feel government should utilize this opportunity to ensure that MMF segment strive on this scheme and enhance the production on MMF. There has already been heavy investments coming in terms of weaving in the sector. However, the major lacking investment, what we see, and which is a bottleneck to MMF segment, is processing. Government may look at the scheme like CHTP or a common influent plant, which are actually hindering the investments in processing today. And no doubt the sustainability of textiles, all this will play a major part of role. So if government can bring in the scheme for processing and which are at par of world ecology levels, I think the world will look at India as a more sustainable producers than the quantum and the cheaper production country. So recycling, again, government must look at some policy to bring and encourage the recycling of textile or sustainability in textiles. How we can initially incentivize the players to use recycle or sustainable textile, which will come into the mainstream once the push from the government is already there. So just not to repeat too many points, which all of them have covered well, I feel the government is in right step, focusing on MMF. Today, what we are hearing is problems on cotton, how we can sustain what we were doing before. Along with this, while this is extremely important, along with this, I think the discussion should focus also on how we can support MMF segment, which has a tremendous capability to register a growth in Indian textiles. So that's my submissions.
Thank you so very much, Bhadresh. I mean, this session was not expected to be actually a review of or evaluation of government's role. It was more about what industry can do to support the government, not the other way around. But I will pose a few questions, time permitting, to the industry. After Lokesh has actually presented a view which is from the customer side, the buyer side. So Lokesh, what it is which is coming in the way of India? I mean, like we said, industry knows what they need to do, the government knows what they need to do. We claim to have sustainable advantages in various areas, that we are actually in the same groove for the last 10, 15 years. So surely there is something missing. What is it that, in case you can highlight on the basis of your understanding from a buyer's perspective?
Yeah, thank you, Seti, for bringing the buyer's voice in the room. We see a lot of councils together. It's always good to understand from the buyer's perspective. So when Arvind sent us an email that what should be the India's roadmap for the TNA industry, I would say we should look at the buyer's roadmap. Where are the buyers looking at for sourcing or even shifting their purchasing or even going back to China? And as Shrimati Darshana also said, our Prime Minister also said, research is very important. If you look at China's initial exports, or even today, and a lot of you are exhibiting in trade fairs, you see how Chinese do the business. They send delegations of 15, 20 people together as a group. They map the entire trade fair. They see where are the opportunities for Chinese factories. They go back home, and they're all paid people by exporters or by state. We don't know that. But they are researchers, maybe students with cameras and notes. And they find out the probable products in that trade fair, which either China is making in lesser quantity or not even making them. For example, since we deal with a lot of handicraft from Moradabad, India's handicraft has been almost dominant for years and decades, but Chinese found a way. They saw that casting is not possible in China because it's a very hand process and a lot of pollution happens. We don't have that caliber. But can we achieve this casting aluminum look in our plastic? And they invested billions into it. In 10 years, I'm talking about somewhere around 2005 to 2015, suddenly there was a surge of plastic looking like aluminum casted products, which is a seasonal product, all across American trade fairs. Some of our exporters who have went with us, and he said, and they were looking at the price tag, they said $4.99, such a big candle holder. Who is selling such cheap aluminum stuff? And I said, it's not aluminum, it's plastic. He went inside the exhibition booth and touched it. He said, wow, it looks like casted aluminum. So the customer needs price, customer needs that look. And they did it by research. They said, we are good in plastic, we are good in investing money into machineries, we are good in reading what the customer needs and working on the strength of India and converting our weakness into a strength. So my advice will be more of engagement with the buyer side. Second example I will give, my experience with China has been a close collaboration with buyers. They don't talk of a one-night stand. They don't talk of one order. They say, I will have my factory completely for you. And the state, the center, every government is standing behind that exporter. And that is a request to our government. And they say, okay, what do you need to have a close collaboration with me that you will be my buyback customer? Look at Bangladesh today. All the big players are there. They have contracts with them before they even started talking about pricing and what to make. They said, can you deliver for next 10 years for me? We have a lot of furniture coming from India, from Jodhpur. And as a buying agent, we are still challenged for a factory we can deliver 100 containers a month. There are customers who are looking at India who said, can you deliver 3,000 containers? And we say, no. Those are the customers we should bring in. We should engage the government, we should engage industry and tell them, what do you need for this factory to have a setup which can deliver you 3,000 containers of furniture, and it's possible. And that's not only one customer. So we need to have a roadmap of the buyer side, get them in the room, lock them into a contract, and then all the stakeholders, the industry, the government, and of course the purchasing community or the buying agent community, we should all focus on how to retain this business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lokesh. You made some exceptionally interesting points. Something very different. I didn't know this part, and it shows my ignorance, that Chinese companies or government actually initiates to send researchers who are not necessarily a part of your team to scout around opportunities in terms of trade shows and conferences and others, and feed that back. It's a very, very intelligent, very simple way, in a way, to figure out what the future might look like. I've never seen that happening in India. Maybe I'm misinformed. We know, I mean, we attend trade shows, but we come back looking only at our product or competition, but not the holistically what is missing as far as India is concerned. So great thought on that. Engagement with the customer, I think it is probably, I think a lot of us, the successful garment companies or textile companies do that. Maybe there is some room for a bit more. And of course, the point you made, scale. Scale cannot come with 100 containers. Factory scale has to come, like you said, to 3,000 container factories, and 3,000 multiplied by 10 times such factories. Only then you're talking in billions, otherwise you're talking about in crores, and that to single or double-digit crores. And the market is getting very consolidated, as we know, even at the buyer side. So thank you so much for bringing these points. Before I open the session to the audience for a few questions, can I request the Secretary if you would like to respond to some of the points which have been made so far, sir?
Not necessarily I will respond, but
or your own comments or observations, sir.
No, quite a few good points have been covered. First of all, I am happy that the issue of sustainability, circularity, traceability is getting somewhat center staged actually. Even though we have done, for example, at one point of time, I remember everybody is worried that what we will do with these bottles actually. In fact, many of the hotels, we said that if these bottles are kept here, we will not have a meeting here. Yeah. We always used to say that, no, you have to have a glass bottle or something. I remember I used to be Secretary Water Resources for more than 3 years, and everywhere we ensured that whenever we have and today, I am told some of the people who are here, Satlas and others, who make use of PET bottles and all, and I am told that perhaps there is a shortage of PET bottles today actually. So maybe that also brings it that already we are doing quite a bit, but somehow these stories also don't get published. I do feel that sometimes what we should do is that whether it's see, all textile journals and all are read by only few people. It is not that general public reads it actually, but somehow we also lack that, whether it's a social media. Today, half of the Indian, what should I say, handloom saris are sold on Instagram, perhaps. This is the kind of, there are certain people who just sold on Instagram. So we should also make use of at least coming out with these good stories. But then still, in fact, I would request the city or whoever does that let's have a half a day or 1 day, a full kind of a workshop only on this sustainability and circularity. Last time when we discussed in the AEPC, the presentation which was made, I would have been happy to see that presentation being made here perhaps, the Satwa consultancy which made the presentation. It was quite an eye-opener. As I was discussing with someone, that we don't have the data. What is the textile waste total gets generated? How much of that is a pre-consumer waste? How much that is a post-consumer waste? How much of that gets recycled, reused? How much of that is recycled, reused maybe, but on a lower value? How much of that goes to incineration? How much of that goes to landfill site? Which everybody knows about the India's landfill sites, and the majority of the contribution to the landfill site is by textiles actually. So even sustainability. Yesterday I was talking with someone says, no, cotton clothes are very sustainable. Is that correct? I'm not very sure, because only thing someone was comparing basically biodegradability maybe with her sustainability. But one of the parameters, not many people know what is nobody talks about water footprints in India. As a secretary for more than 3 years in water resources, I was always talking, whenever I have to go make a talk, I always used to talk of water footprints. Everybody talks of carbon footprints. The water footprints is no less important. What is the water footprint of a coffee which I just had? Maybe something like 120 or 140 liters of water footprints is that cup of black coffee which I had. So, what is the water footprints of a cotton shirt you are wearing or a pair of jeans which you are wearing? So, a sustainability will have to be seen, not only an entire process actually, entire process. But anyway, it's good that we are talking it, and it's not only a affluent management or something, it's much more than that, or not only a biodegradability. So it's good that we have started taking it seriously and talking about it seriously. There are a couple of things I find that even though textile, I don't think how much industry can do and what government has to do, but FDI flow into textile industry has been very, very low actually. For whatever reasons maybe, we have to look into it. Maybe some of the things which as government has done in recent past, we are not able to sell to the world. Whether it's a ease of doing business or whether it's a
600 billion in last 20 years, 3.77.
Okay, so I was, he was giving me the data of FDI. Now FDI, I am told that entire Vietnam today a success story is primarily because of the FDI. The companies from Taiwan, company from China, company from Korea, company from Japan came and set up their shop actually there. And that's why they have today the size and scale. So we need to look at with the recent initiative of whether it's a decriminalization of acts or whether it's a ease of doing business or whether it's a single window clearance or whether it's a whatever the measures, Gati Shakti, with all that, and maybe one of the problems used to be getting a land itself. But under PM Mitra program where 1,000 acres of land would be available for anyone to set up shop, I think we need to jointly do something more on a FDI. Similarly, the case with technology. I find that the kind of technology use which has been there in many other industries. Perhaps we have not been very great as far as the use of technology is concerned. Even when we are talking of recycling or reusing even a textile waste and all, basically technology plays an important role. So technology plays a very important role elsewhere. Fine, we all take pride in the sense that it's a very labor intensive kind of industry and second largest employer and all. But the fact remains that labor productivity, for example, in India is pretty poor. Perhaps it's poorer than even a Bangladesh, certainly much poorer than even Vietnam or China. That's why today Vietnam, perhaps per capita labor cost would be 3 or 4 times than us. Forget about China. But still they are able to compete in certain regions because the labor productivity is very high. So I don't know whether it's only a labor laws simplification or whether there are many other things. In the sense that if you employ a large number of labor in apparel and garment industry, have you provided kind of a facility there itself for those laborers to stay and everything else? Maybe ladies who come to work to provide a creche or provide a daycare center for them and all that is part of it. So we should look into, in my opinion, labor productivity as well. Now what Mr. Gautam Nair was saying, everybody was thinking that China is vacating so much space and that space is for the grab. But that may not be true as you were saying, because you said that China's export last year in apparel and garments itself grew by 30 billion. It's such a huge giant actually that so we cannot only bank upon that China will vacate some space and which we will fill up actually. Of course, the other which I was talking with LMW people and we talked in the morning, also I said that textile machinery is also one area. Of course, we were trying to bring in the revised ATEXCON scheme where we wanted to bring in, but in some form we will try to bring in maybe incentivizing certain kind of textile manufacturing. Apart from, of course, spinning. That is also should be one of the agendas actually. Then there, of course, there are, he was talking when handicrafts, that reminded me. Somehow I am someone who has become a little sentimental about handlooms and handicrafts in India actually. So I know whenever we talk of textile, we don't talk of much of handloom and handicrafts, because in terms of number, sheer number, when you talk of something like a domestic and that figure, of course, that's another problem, that textile industry doesn't have the proper data actually. Somebody says that, okay, our domestic size is 100 billion and export 40 billion, total 140 billion. This data perhaps you are hearing for last 7-8 years. Sometimes you say 120 plus 40, so I don't know. So at that compared to that, handloom will not occupy a very huge space. But the kind of weaves we have in the country, I always say that it's not only a livelihood of, let's say, a crore of artisans and weavers, about 100 lakhs, artisans and weavers, but the kind of weaves which we have, which is a national heritage actually. So we should, the people present here also should also talk in terms of handloom and handicrafts, not only in the domestic market, in the export market as well. So there are quite a few other things, but it's good that yesterday only, you were there also yesterday evening, no? No. Acha, okay. That lady who, there were some few people who met yesterday the minister, because I was thinking since long to have some kind of a meeting with buying and sourcing agency federations vis-a-vis some of you, the manufacturers, because as rightly have you pointed out that yes, it is not that there is no dialogue, but that perhaps that dialogue has to be taken to a next level to understand actually that why is it. Again, time and again we talk of Uniqlo, and a time and again in the morning also I said, but I'm not only Uniqlo, whoever is the larger kind of a, whether it's a Target, whether it's a, whatever name you say, why is it that they all want to source, I am told, from India, but if they are not sourcing enough, one reason of course he says again that size and scale, that perhaps we don't have. If they want some 1 million pieces or 2 million pieces in 15 days, perhaps we are not able to do it. But that could be one. But there could be issue relating to quality, there could be issue relating to processes. So perhaps we need to sit down and remove those bottlenecks so that we would be able to do better. But what intrigued me most, which I thought I'll tell in the at the end, was that this session was called Rebuilding India's Textile and Apparel Industry. I don't know whether, generally when we talk of rebuilding, we think in terms of rebuilding there's something which has been destroyed or something and then rebuilding. So I thought that maybe first section when we talk of reimagining, that was perhaps a better description than calling a rebuilding. It gives us some kind of a connotation that this has been destroyed or something. I don't think so. Maybe we haven't done as well as some others perhaps have done. But the signs are good, our fundamentals are good, and government has been, to the extent, government has been very proactive, at least because first thing is we listen to the industry and get the feedback and we try to act on those also. But then everybody should realize that in a fragmented value chain, it's very difficult to take care of all the players in the fragmented value chain. Today, I am saying here, let us say someone mentioned me about, let's say, Reliance today wants anti-dumping duty on MEG or something, and maybe a DGTR would be having a hearing or whatever it may be. Now, there would be people who are user of that, they would say that you will be doing a disservice, maybe service to one person, but disservice to large number of people. But then there are people who have invested or you want to invest in PTA or MEG or even VSF or something. They also feel that we need to protect it actually. So it becomes a little difficult balancing act for the government, but still we try basically to balance everybody's interest and do something. It's a maximization kind of exercise or a optimization kind of exercise which we used to read in our colleges, that you maximize A1, X1 plus B2, X2, blah, blah, and all subject to this, there and all. So there are quite a few constraints, but we would be trying to take care of that. So that's all I have to say at this stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I can just add one point before I come to Gautam. I have a little bit of exposure indirectly to automobile sector and the consumer durables and appliances sector. I can assure you that the governments, their counterpart in the various ministries involved, are far less receptive and proactive, if I may say so, compared to what the textile sector has been, and I can say that with absolute no doubt in my mind. There. So just wanted to mention this point to yourself. Gautam, you had a point?
I'll just endorse what Arvind just said, that our Ministry of Textiles has been extraordinarily supportive in terms of all the deliberations we've had on certain very tricky points. And as the Secretary just said, it's very difficult to balance so many conflicting interests, interests which could be conflicting at some time. So that point is well taken. Your point about rebuilding also occurred to me. I actually thought it was a misprint in what I had got. Because when I saw this and said reimagining, I said that's a more healthy thing to do. But in the spirit of reimagining, I just want to suggest a few points to the three segments we are talking to here. One is the government, one is the apparel industry, and the third is the textile industry. So in the government, again, harking back to the point which Arvind made in the introduction, what is important for us is to create a competitive ecosystem. So when we are talking of encouraging competitive manufacturing, when we are trying to answer questions like, why is Uniqlo not manufacturing more? So as you know, we were with the Uniqlo group in Tokyo only 3 weeks ago, and we made a presentation to them. And they assured us on 2 or 3 things. One, that they are increasing their apparel sourcing. They're already in talks with some other factories, etc. 2, the problem, frankly, quality is a big concern for them worldwide. But it's not that they're especially concerned that in India they won't get quality. When they go to good apparel manufacturers, they have system and processes to get the quality they need. Incidentally, I'm also a manufacturer for Uniqlo, but in a leather business. So if government can work towards encouraging competitive manufacturing, and that involves helping state governments, so identify, let's say, 6 state governments who are genuinely interested in encouraging labor-intensive manufacturing, work with them to do 2 or 3 things. First, to deliver on the commitments they make. Second, to tweak the commitments a little bit so we can create this ecosystem where the end objective should be to have competitive manufacturing. A state government can offer fantastic incentives, but if the rest of the ecosystem is not there, over a period of time, you won't have a healthy base out there, sir. So our ministry can play a very proactive role when we're talking of imagining the future in doing that. Second, sir, we are delighted to hear your appreciation of what AEPC did in as far as sustainability is concerned. I assure you it's only the beginning. In the end of October, we're having a full-day seminar on sustainability where there'll be leading speakers from internationally and great examples from the textile industry in India who are actually have world-class systems in sustainability, and we want them to tell their story better to all of us so that we can also learn from it. But one area which we'll request the government, India, we had a lot of egg on our face in the last 2 or 3 years on the issue of organic cotton, where India was suddenly showing more organic cotton than was even produced in India, just because of, we all know the fraud certification, etc., which happened. Can we solve that problem? Can government help to solve that problem, sir, by involving the office of, say, the Textile Commissioner and promoting or setting up systems for traceability so that you can actually trace organic cotton down perhaps to the field in which it was grown, where it was ginned, and all the processes that go subsequently, so that the end consumer has a complete assurance that if I am buying a label saying organic cotton, this is genuinely organic cotton. And that can be a pilot project, sir, because today the government is, today the world is moving far ahead of that. It can also be used for traceability for regular cotton also, because organic cotton can be only the starting point, sir. Sir, we talked of raw material security. We need to declare as a policy of Government of India, or at least the Ministry of Textiles, that we want to promote the export of value-added products. So, home textiles, apparel, fabrics, this is what we should promote in exporting, not arming our competition against us by exporting cotton, sir. You already mentioned, sir, that there are some macro issues in cotton which only government can help solve. Contamination is a big issue. Productivity is something which you've already been working on. I think branding of cotton is a fabulous incentive to do. And my last message, particularly for members of the textile industry here, and for those from the apparel industry who might be here, the need of the hour is to build capacities. I would encourage the textile industry players here to think of a forward integration into garment making. Think of collaborations with garment manufacturers if you think you need that. But, that supply of capacity, I believe, in today's world will create its own demand. And the same message for our apparel players, most of whom I know are already engaged in capacity expansion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gautam. With this, I would only want to thank all the panelists and especially the Textile Secretary. You have a point to make, Lokesh?
Just
okay?
30 seconds. So, Upendraji, 2 more things which we need to do, as you mentioned. As I said, research. So we need to find space. So technical textile is a very high value growth area. And we have just started doing it. And only China has been the dominant player in that. So that is where we should actually focus on a lot of the industry investment. Other is promoting slow fashion across the world. A lobby to be created among the other ministries also, and spreading the word in the world that slow fashion is the future, because that is where we are strong. Instead of, I'm sorry if industry is of fast fashion sitting here, but we are not competitive in fast fashion. We might be very good as consumers, but we are not good in producers. So I would say focus on slow fashion, which is our strength in manufacturing. Thank you.
Perfectly well made points, Lokesh. Thank you so much. And thank you also to the Textile Secretary for actually not only just picking up some of the comments which came from the panelists, but also adding a few more dimensions to that. So thank you so much. And thank you very much, CT, for inviting all of us to be a part of this opening panel.
In fact, a big thanks to our respected Secretary for giving so much of time and chairing the session. I also thank the moderator, Mr. Arvind Singhal. And now may I request our Secretary to felicitate the panelists, starting with Mr. Arvind Singhal. So, thank you, sir. Mr. Gautam Nair. Chairman, Export Promotion Committee, Apparel Export Promotion Council. Thank you, sir, for your deliberations. Mr. Sunil Patwari, Vice Chairman, Textile. Mr. Bhadresh Dodhiya, Vice Chairman, SRTPC. Mr. Lokesh Parashar, Federation of Buying Agents. May I request Mr. Ashwin Chandran, Vice Chairman, City, to felicitate Secretary Textiles. A big thank you to all the participants in this deliberation.